back, whiskey enthusiasts. I am very pleased today to be able to try for you the Old Forester Rye that has just been released. I bought this bottle this morning. It's the first time I had run into it on the shelf. I've been checking every few days, and I've been, over the last 12 months or so, I've been very pleased with the new releases that Old Forester has been offering. So I'm really excited about this one, and I hope that you are too. Very briefly, this is not a new recipe. It has been over 40 years since they've used it, but they've owned this recipe since 1940, when Owsley Brown bought another distillery and acquired the recipe for what was then known as the Normandy Rye brand. This is 65% rye, 20% malted barley, and 15% corn. Apparently they've made it in the past, but it's been a very long time. So this is a welcome addition. It is higher rye than what you typically see with things like Pikesville, and it is lower rye than the 95% or to 100% that you see from MGP ryes and Canadian 100% ryes. So it's kind of in the middle in a unique little niche, and I'm happy to be trying it now for the first time. I've not tasted it yet. The glass has been sitting here for a few minutes. I admit that my hopes are high. So let's see if they've earned my accolades again. The initial nose is not nearly as floral as I would have expected. I get a lot of sweetness mixed with a warm spice. Were I to have not known the mash bill, I would have thought that this had more corn in it than what it does. More like maybe a 25% corn mash. As I nose it further, the sweetness is falling away a little, and I get more spices. I get more of the cinnamon, and I get some clove, maybe some cardamom. And now finally, at the end of the nose, I'm finding some of the herbal and floral notes I expected. Yeah, there's some wildflower floral notes. There's some herb notes. There's a little bit of licorice. So overall, I'm very pleased with the nose. It has different facets to it. I loved the way it was sweet in the beginning and that faded away. Based solely on the nose, I'm surprised at the price point of this. That was my very first sip of alcohol today. I never give notes on the first sip of the day because there's that punch to your tongue on that first sip. It's not really a good representation. There's a warm baking spice combination that doesn't really come across as a single spice, but as a grouping. at the very beginning. And that really holds up all the way through the palate. There is more herbal note in the palate, but once again, it's a sweeter herbal note than I'm usually accustomed to. Almost like chai spices, for any of you who like Indian food and you drink chai. There's a little bit of white pepper popping up in the palate. There's, again, that little hint of licorice, but not much. There's a little bit of a, I can't say I've ever named this note before, but there's a little bit of a chive thing going on there, almost oniony, but lighter than onion, which is why I say chive. Very late in the palate. The sweetness never quite goes away, although it's dominated heavily by the spice and to a lesser degree the herbs in the palate. But it pops back up as vanilla in the latter part of the palate. The finish is a little oily. I expected it to be dry, but the finish starts off a little oily. You get a little bit of that wood char. You keep the pepper and the herbs more than you do the sweetness. So although it's oily, it's not sweet. Another thing that I've noticed that's a little bit unique, when I first take it into my mouth, I get almost exclusively the spice notes. When I part my lips and allow a little air in onto the alcohol, there's an immediate release of the herbals. That's a little bit unusual. There's a drastic change when you let air into your mouth to get those herbals. If you didn't let any air enter your mouth while the whiskey is there, you probably wouldn't get nearly as much herbal as you would if you do. So I think that this is probably going to taste a little different to different people depending on the exact way in which they drink it. All in all, I like this a lot. I think this is another hit for Old Forester. I think they are doing some of the most interesting bottlings of any of the major manufacturers in American whiskey. They're being innovative and they're breaking the mold with some of the mash bills and some of the ways in which they're casking without going too far out into the craft style whiskey realm. I think this is really good. This is 100 proof, in case I didn't tell you that. And I think for the price, it is very, very good. I did not do it for this tasting, but I think this deserves for me to put it side by side privately with one of my go-to ryes for cocktails, which is Rittenhouse and see how they compare to each other. I expect this to be more balanced and have more herbal notes to it than the Rittenhouse, but I expect them to be similar in quality. I think this is a bottle that you absolutely must try in its price range. Now the score. And I consider price when I make my scorings on things. The nose on this I'm going to rate pretty high. The nose, especially for the price range, is about an 87 for me. Now, if I were to compare it to other more expensive things, and if this was a $75 bottle, the nose wouldn't score quite that high. But you have to consider value when you're considering these scores for me. Without considering the price market that it's in, the scores don't mean anything. So 87 on the nose. The palate for me is about an 85. And the finish, is tougher for me. Because I'll stick with 85 on the finish too. I know that this is a pretty high score for something like this. Again, I consider the price. I think I paid $23 for this. Everything I've seen tells me that it's going to be running between $20 and $24. I think it's a great value, and everybody ought to try it at least once. So there you have it. Take it for what it's worth. Ignore me if you disagree. Y'all have a good day, and go find some whiskey you'll love.